It begins not with a shout, but with a murmur, a voice older than language itself, threading through the silence between heartbeats. For some, it comes in dreams, as inkless words burning on the walls of memory. For others, it is a fleeting shadow across an ancient manuscript, the letters seeming to shift when no one is looking. It is the call of the forbidden text, the summons to knowledge that the world has tried and failed to bury. They say that in the earliest dawns of civilization, before the first cities claimed their names, before stone was raised into temples, there were scrolls not written by human hands, carved in languages now dissolved into dust. They spoke of origins not taught in our schools, and of destinies that kings feared to utter aloud. Some were etched upon thin sheets of gold and hidden beneath sacred hills, others upon black crystal tablets sealed inside tombs that had no doors. These texts, the ancients warned, were not meant for every eye. They carried the power to unmake empires, to turn the faithful into heretics, and to free the mind from the invisible chains of its age. Priests in white linen whispered that the gods themselves had given, or perhaps cursed, humanity with these records, and so, as centuries turned, the custodians of power learned to lock them away behind walls of law, dogma, and fear. Yet the forbidden has a gravity all its own. Across the epochs, seekers have felt its pull. Sumerian astrologer priests, who memorized the movements of the stars only to find the heavens out of place. Egyptian scribes who copied rituals in moonlight, knowing the penalty was the silence of the grave. Alexandrian philosophers who spoke in riddles so the ignorant would pass them by. Each of them touched the edge of the veil, and left behind fragments for the next soul bold enough to continue. You, too, have felt it, that quiet insistence that something is missing from the official tale of the world. And so you stand now at the threshold, lantern in hand, the night deep and unbroken before you. Ahead lies the path to those who kept the forbidden texts alive in shadow, who smuggled wisdom through time like contraband fire. Step forward. The first door is about to open. The trail begins in a land whose name is barely remembered, though its bones lie beneath the soil of Mesopotamia. Here, between the Tigris and Euphrates, once stood a civilization older than Babylon, older even than summer's first kings, a people whose astronomers charted the heavens when other tribes still huddled by their fires. It was in the crumbled ruins of one such city, long buried beneath layers of conquest and time, that archaeologists unearthed a set of clay tablets unlike any other. The script was cuneiform, yet not quite, its symbols sharper, more intricate, as though the hands that pressed them into wet clay belonged to those for whom writing itself was a sacred geometry. These were no mere records of trade or law. When translated, the tablets spoke of the Anunnaki, beings who descended in ages before the moon was placed in the sky, who fashioned mankind from clay mixed with the breath of the stars. But there was more, a passage written in the first person, as though one of these ancient beings had left behind their own testimony. It spoke of a covenant between heaven and earth, sealed not in faith, but in knowledge, cycles of time measured, not in years, but in eons, the rise and fall of civilizations predetermined by a great cosmic clock. Such revelations were dangerous. When word of the translation reached certain academic circles, the project was abruptly halted. The tablets vanished into the vaults of private collectors, replaced in official archives by dull, harmless duplicates, the story rewritten to fit the safer narrative of myth. Yet the true texts had already imprinted themselves upon the minds of a few scholars, who began to see patterns in history where others saw coincidence, empires rising at intervals like the ticking of a hidden mechanism, disasters arriving with celestial precision. From these ashes came the first clue that history is not a straight road, but a spiral, and that someone or something has been turning the wheel. To follow this spiral, We must leave the dry sands of Mesopotamia and descend into another chamber of secrecy, one buried beneath the limestone heart of Egypt, where the forbidden words were not pressed into clay, but carved into stone that bleeds light. Beneath the shifting sands of the Giza Plateau, far from the reach of tourists and daylight, lies a network of passages older than the pyramids themselves. Few have entered them, and fewer still have returned with truth unaltered by fear. Here, in a chamber sealed for millennia, the walls do not merely bear carvings, they emit a faint, cold light, as though the stone itself remembers the sun of another age. It was within this chamber that an object known among initiates as the lapis codex was found, not a book in the familiar sense, but a slab of black basalt, its surface inlaid with veins of a luminous mineral no geologist could identify. Upon it, hieroglyphs shift subtly when the viewer's gaze lingers too long, forming new combinations of meaning, as if the stone were alive to the consciousness of its reader. The priests of ancient Kem knew this codex well, though its existence was kept from the uninitiated. According to fragments of temple lore, it was said to have been given by Thoth, not merely the scribe of the gods, but the keeper of all measures, the architect of reality itself. The codex contained formulas, not of alchemy in the crude sense, but of the transmutation of time and space. Lines of text described how the soul might walk backward through its own incarnations, unmaking the karmic threads that bound it, or forward into futures not yet born. Yet the codex was never meant to be read in isolation. It was part of a greater architecture, the temples themselves, whose walls, columns, and courtyards were arranged according to principles of sacred geometry that acted as a living cipher, without standing in the right place, at the right moment, under the right alignment of stars. The codex would remain inert stone. When Napoleon's expedition entered Egypt, whispers suggest that a handful of officers were led to the chamber. The codex, according to certain suppressed accounts, was quietly taken aboard a French vessel and vanished into the labyrinth of European secret societies. But the chamber's walls, they still glow faintly in the dark, as though awaiting the return of the reader who can awaken the stone. The trail now leads northward, across the Mediterranean, where the forbidden text would reappear in a new form, no longer etched in stone, but inscribed on vellum, hidden among the heretical manuscripts of a library the church tried to burn from memory. The trail winds to a storm-lashed coast in the south of France, where a fortress monastery once guarded one of the most dangerous libraries in Christendom. Its stone walls, blackened by centuries of candle smoke, still bear the faint scorch marks of a fire meant to erase a memory. For here, among illuminated gospels and patristic treatises, the monks hid works they themselves barely understood. Manuscripts copied in secret from older scrolls said to have come from Alexandria before the Great Fire. One such manuscript, bound in darkened calfskin, was known in whispers as Liber Tenebrae, the Book of Shadows. It was not the grim tome of spells imagined by later romantics, but a compilation of fragments from sources older than the Bible itself, in Latin so precise it seemed almost mechanical. It described the world as a layered illusion, spheres within spheres, each ruled by its own archon, each veil hiding the one beyond. The most heretical passage told of a first architect, a being not divine in the sense of loving creation, but mathematical in purpose, a cosmic artisan who built reality as a machine, endlessly cycling life through birth, death, and rebirth, to harvest what it called the light of the lost. To escape this cycle, the text claimed, one had to awaken a hidden faculty of the mind, a mirror eye that could see the gears of existence turning and step outside them. The Church saw such teachings as poison. To say that the material world was a trap, and that salvation required bypassing the very Creator worshipped at the altar, was unthinkable. Orders were sent from Rome. The monastery's gates were battered down, its shelves overturned, and most of the Liber Tenebris pages consigned to flame, yet fire is an imperfect censor. 3 monks, bound by vows deeper than obedience, smuggle the copy into the catacombs beneath the city of Carcassonne, where it was hidden among ossuaries and relics. Centuries later, fragments of it would surface again, this time in the hands of alchemists who claimed its diagrams of spheres concealed formulas for the philosopher's stone. Whether they were right, or merely chasing a mirage, the Church could not allow such words to breathe, and so the Book of Shadows vanished again. But some texts refused to die. Our journey now moves eastward to the windswept steppes, where the frozen ground guards a codex whose pages are not of paper, but of silk, and whose language was said to be taught by beings who came riding on the roar itself. Far from the cathedrals and courts of Europe, beyond the reach of Latin chroniclers, an empire once thrived on the boundless steppes, a realm of sky-born drums, firelit rituals, and shamans whose eyes had seen beyond the edges of the world. Its kings left few stone monuments, for their power did not rest in walls or cities, but in the living pulse of the land and sky. When the snows receded each spring, the shamans would gather in a place they called the Navel of the Wind, ring of black stones older than their own people, where the northern lights spilled across the horizon like molten silk. There, they would unfurl a sacred object forbidden to the uninitiated. The Silk Codex. Unlike the rigid scripts of other civilizations, the codex's symbols were fluid, woven in shimmering threads of gold and silver into dark silk that caught the light in strange ways. To an outsider, the symbols seemed to dance and ripple, shifting into shapes that resembled constellations, then animals, then fragments of human faces. The shamans claimed it was not a book to be read but a map to be entered, each pattern an opening into another realm. The origin of the codex was said to lie in the age when the sky riders descended in chariots of fire drawn by beasts with wings like auroras. These beings, neither gods nor men, took the first shamans to travel the invisible rivers between worlds, carrying messages and healing across the veil. The codex contained the roots, not of land or sea, but of soul and dream. When the empire fell to invading armies, the Silk Codex was hidden deep within a permafrost cavern, guarded by rites designed to freeze the soul of any who entered unprepared. For centuries, it lay dormant, its silk as fresh as the day it was woven, its symbols still alive with that strange light. In the early 20th century, an expedition led by a Soviet ethnographer stumbled upon it. The men who touched it without permission reported dreams so vivid they awoke screaming, convinced their hearts were still trapped in another world. The codex was taken to Leningrad for scientific study and promptly disappeared into the vaults of state archives. But its influence had already spread. Certain designs began to appear in the art of secret societies, embedded in architecture, even in the logos of government projects that dealt with the unspoken sciences. As if the rivers mapped by the codex were flowing again, waiting for another crossing. To follow that current, we must descend from the steppes into a place where stone and water meet, a sunken temple whose inscriptions were never meant for human eyes, and where a forbidden text waits beneath the tide. Far to the south, where the warm waters of the Aegean turn suddenly dark, fishermen speak of shadows moving beneath their boats, not the fleeting shapes of fish, but the silhouettes of columns, arches, and walls far below. Here, beneath layers of coral and silk, lies the ruin of a temple city swallowed by the sea in an age when the stars were not where they are now. Divers who have braved the currents tell of a central hall whose floor is a single slab of polished green stone, etched with glyphs no scholar has been able to identify. The hall's pillars are carved into the likeness of beings with elongated skulls and eyes like tidal pools, beings who hold open scrolls whose text seems to shimmer even in the deep's eternal night. At the heart of this hall rests a sealed chest of Orichalcum, a metal once described by Plato in his account of Atlantis. Those few who have seen it claim it hums faintly, as if alive, and bears the sigil of an 8-pointed star entwined with a serpent. Within, according to divers half-whispered accounts, is the Thalassian Codex, written on sheets of hammered copper. The codex does not read in lines but in spirals, each coil leading the mind deeper into patterns that echo the whorls of seashells and the spirals of galaxies. It speaks of the deep remembering, the ocean as a living archive of every thought, sound, and dream since the birth of the world. By entering its currents in the right state, one could retrieve memories not their own, the building of forgotten cities, the chants of vanished tribes, even visions from before humanity itself. But the Codex also warns of the keepers, vast intelligences that dwell in the trenches, shaping the tides of history as easily as they move the waves. To learn too much of them is to invite their gaze, and their gaze is not merciful. The last known expedition to reach the drowned library returned with only one survivor, a man found drifting days later, his eyes milky and his tongue speaking in an unrecorded language. The copper spiral he carried was confiscated, vanishing into the archives of a naval intelligence agency. Officially, the drowned library does not exist, and yet currents flow between all hidden places. The spiral in the Thalassian Codex leads upward now, toward the mountains, to a monastery carved into the bones of the earth, where the last forbidden text waits, not to be found, but to find you. High in the Himalayas, where the air thins and the mountains become white walls against the heavens, there stands a monastery without a name. No road leads to it. Pilgrims arrive only by paths revealed in dreams, or by following the sound of a bell that tolls with no visible ringer. Its walls are carved directly into the cliff face, their black stone veined with streaks of quartz that catch the sunrise like molten gold. Within, past winding corridors lit by butter lamps, is a chamber, lined with nothing but mirrors of polished obsidian. In the center rests a single lectern, and upon it, the nameless book. It is said to be bound in leather so dark it absorbs light, its pages thin as breath. The script is unlike any alphabet, more a flowing pattern that seems to move as the eye follows it. But here is its secret. The book does not reveal the same text to every reader. It reflects the mind as a mirror reflects the face, yet in words. For one, it might unfold the hidden history of their bloodline, stretching back through lives unremembered. For another, it may offer visions of futures they have not yet chosen, or warn of ones they cannot escape. For a few, it writes not of their life, but of their death, with such detail that the heart falters even in the act of reading. The monks say it is not they who guard the book, but the book that guards itself. Those unready find only blank pages, or else words that drive them into madness, for the book speaks in the language of the soul's own shadow. Some believe it is a fragment of the Akashic record, the eternal ledger of all that has been and will be, torn free and given form so that humanity might confront itself. Others whisper it was placed here by those who built the first cities, as the final test for any who dared seek ultimate knowledge. No copy of the nameless book exists. It cannot be photographed, and the memory of its words fades like mist unless one writes them in their own hand, a task many dare not attempt, for fear the act of writing will make the words real. It is from this monastery that the last and most dangerous of the forbidden texts is said to have been carried away centuries ago by a wandering adept. That text is not stored in a vault, nor hidden in ruins, but travels, moving from place to place like a living thing, seeking out those who will continue the chain. It begins as a rumor. A stranger arrives in a remote village, carrying a satchel wrapped in oilcloth, its contents never shown in daylight, wherever they pass. People dream the same dream, a winding stair descending into darkness, the air thick, with the smell of old paper and rain-soaked earth. Some wake with words on their tongue in a language they'd never spoken. Others wake with tears. The stranger does not stay long. They leave behind no name, no payment, only a sense that something has been left in the air, and sometimes in the possession of one chosen soul, a manuscript that should not exist. This is the Codex Peregrinus, the wandering book. Unlike the other forbidden texts, it has no fixed form. Its binding changes with the centuries, its script shifting to match the language of the reader, yet always holding the same pulse of meaning beneath. Those who have held it describe the sensation not of reading but of being read. The pages turn of their own accord, stopping where they choose, revealing passages that seem to speak directly into the marrow of the seeker's being. In one account, a 17th century alchemist wrote that the Codex revealed the moment of his soul's first birth. In another, a 20th century dissident claimed it gave him the exact phrase that would ignite a revolution. Some say it teaches, others that it judges. The most unsettling truth is that the Codex never stays. Once its work with a reader is complete, it vanishes, not stolen, not sold, simply gone, leaving behind only fragments in memory, dreams, or in the life that the reader is suddenly compelled to live. Yet there are those who whisper that the Codex is not a book at all, but a living intelligence wearing the disguise of parchment and ink, moving through time to shape the trajectory of history according to a pattern no human mind can fully grasp. Across ages, the forbidden texts we have followed, from the stone tablets of Mesopotamia to the glowing Codex of Egypt, the Book of Shadows, the Silk Codex, the Thalassian spirals, the Nameless Book, all seem like scattered pages of a greater manuscript. Perhaps the Codex Peregrinus is that manuscript whole, wandering the world until every fragment is reunited, until the spiral completes and the veil drops from human eyes. And perhaps, as you hear these words now, you have already been chosen. Perhaps the manuscript is nearer than you think, its pages rustling softly in the dark, waiting for the moment when you will open it, and it will begin to write you.